This is Brian Wilson, State Policy Director with National Skills Coalition. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on state policies to support sector partnerships. Looking at the next slide, you can see today's speakers. Today we will have Brooke Durenzis, Senior State Policy Analyst with National Skills Coalition, Nancy Snyder, President, Commonwealth Corporation, Emily Teplin-Lesh, Assistant Director, Policy and Industry Partnerships, Colorado Workforce Development Council, Carrie Carr, Coordinator, Administrator, WSOS Community Action, Ohio Workforce Coalition. Next slide, please. What we will be covering today is first an overview of sector partnership policy in the states. Brooke will present National Skills Coalition's 50-state scan and toolkit. This is the first time any organization has published a full 50-state scan of sector partnership policies. And we also have our toolkit, which is a guide for policymakers and advocates who want to establish sector partnership policies in their state. Next, we'll have a conversation with our speakers from Massachusetts, Colorado, and Ohio regarding what's happening in the states. Then we will have question and answers with the audience. So please do type in those questions that you have, and we will get to them during that part of the webinar. With that, I would like to now turn it over to Brooke Durenzis.
Great, thanks Brian, and thanks to everyone on the line for joining our webinar today. As Brian said, I'm going to give an overview of our 50-state scan on sector partnership policies and our toolkit. Before I get started on state policy, though, I thought it would be useful just to talk about what a sector partnership is and what it does. So sector partnerships bring together multiple employers within an industry with education and training providers, labor, community-based organizations, and others to address an industry's skill needs. They typically occur at a local or regional level, and an organization with industry expertise, capacity, and credibility among partners convenes the partnerships, with employers playing an important leadership role. You can see that illustrated on this slide here. Sector partnerships are a proven strategy for producing good outcomes for workers and for employers, and it's really important to underscore that under the new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, sector partnerships are a required activity. Next slide, please. So what do sector partnerships do? Well, sector partnerships come together to analyze an industry's current and future skill needs as they pertain to a local area, and they identify occupations that have skill gaps within a particular industry. Then they come up with a plan to close those skill gaps and assist in the implementation of that plan. Implementation activities typically include creating or informing education and training programs, but they're not limited to just that. So for example, sector partnerships can engage in activities like identifying common skill standards, promoting certain industry recognized credentials, or assisting in creating career pathways that lead to skilled jobs in the sector. Next slide, please. So moving on to state policy, while sector partnerships themselves tend to take place at the local or regional level, states can adopt policies to support partnerships in local communities throughout their state. And at NSC, we've created a definition of a state sector partnership policy. We define that as a state-level policy that authorizes ongoing support for local sector partnerships through funding, technical assistance, and/or program initiatives. I'm going to give a quick description of each of these categories. So funding are grants that are provided to partnerships on an ongoing basis, and this can be done through using federal resources, state resources, or a combination of the two. For our scan, we don't count a state as having a funding policy if it uses a one-time federal grant that specifies partnerships as a key activity. Technical assistance is another form of support that can be provided to partnerships by states, and it can take several forms, as I'm going to describe later in my presentation. And then finally, states can use what we call program initiatives to promote the use of local sector partnerships as a key part of the state's workforce development strategy, and they can also use these initiatives to set criteria for sector partnerships. So, for example, states can adopt legislation that sets a policy framework for sector partnerships, or governors can have executive orders, or state agencies like workforce boards might develop resolutions, requests for proposals, or other types of guidance around sector partnerships and criteria for them. Next slide, please. So using that definition of a state sector partnership policy, we conducted a scan of the 50 states. And through that scan, we identified 21 states, which you can see highlighted here in green on the map, that provide ongoing support to local partnerships through at least one of the 3 policy components that I just described: funding, technical assistance, or program initiatives. Of these 21 states, however, policies in place that include all 3 types of those support. Next slide, please. So we really think there's an opportunity for states to establish new policies or to grow their existing ones to include all 3 types of support or be very robust in those areas. And we think there's key benefits to robust policies that include funding, technical assistance, and program initiatives. For example, states with robust policies can really expand their local community's use of sector partnerships. So the more robust the state policy, the more likely more communities will have access to sector partnerships, which again are a proven strategy for workers and employers. By having robust policies, states can shape the quality of services that are provided to employers and workers through sector partnerships, and in particular, funding, technical assistance, and criteria are important for helping guide the quality of services. States can also use robust policies to make sector partnerships an integral component of their workforce system. So if they have a robust policy that clarifies that sector partnerships are going to be one of the state's key and central workforce strategies, they can make sure that those sector partnerships are aligned with other strategies like career pathways instead of having sector partnerships be a kind of isolated standalone program. And then finally, and importantly, state sector partnership policies can be used to carry out WIOA requirements for states to support local sector partnerships. And there's requirements for states to do this at the state board level and in state planning. Next slide, please. So to help states advance sector partnership policies, we've developed a toolkit, as was mentioned earlier. And this toolkit includes a guide on key elements of a robust state sector partnership policy, a legislative template for state sector partnership policy, which can also serve as the basis for an executive order. It includes case studies from 3 states and examples of local sector partnerships that those 3 states support. And then it includes links to resources from the states, such as legislation, RFP, toolkits, websites, etc. I'm going to be reviewing some of the key recommendations that are made in the guide, but I want to note that the toolkit provides examples from states on each of the recommendations that I'll be making. Next slide, please. So in regard to funding, the first policy element, we recommend that states use a combination of federal and state funds to provide grants to local sector partnerships. Under WIOA, states have to use a portion of Title I statewide reserve funds, which are also sometimes called a governor set-aside or a statewide set-aside, to support sector partnerships. And we think that states can extend funding to local sector partnerships by combining these WIOA statewide reserve funds or a portion of those statewide reserve funds with state funds. We also recommend that states consider requiring local partnerships portion of given grant amounts, either monetarily or in kind, as a way to promote buy-in from partners. And finally, for states that are using funding to establish new sector partnerships in local areas, we recommend that they provide 2-phased planning and implementation grants. And planning grants have shown to be important for providing an opportunity for partners to formally come together to identify their industry's needs and develop a plan to address those needs. Next slide, please. So in terms of technical assistance, the second policy element, we think that states can provide technical assistance in a variety of ways, and we're going to hear more about this type of technical assistance from folks on the phone today. So examples of technical assistance that could be included can include things like direction and counseling from state staff in helping local partnerships become established and then sustain themselves, professional development and capacity building through things like academies, toolkits, and peer sharing networks, customized labor market and economic analysis that local partnerships can use to really understand their industries, and information on industry trends, anything the state has pertaining to skill standards and employer-recognized credentials is very helpful. And then finally, information on other state workforce development resources like career pathways and training programs so that those things can be integrated into the work that the sector partnerships are doing. Okay, next slide, please. In terms of the final policy element on program initiatives, we recommend that states adopt program initiatives that both promote sector partnerships as a key component of the state's workforce strategy and that set criteria for sector partnerships. So the toolkit discusses specifically how states can set criteria for local partnerships in key areas like geographic area served, target industries, identification of conveners and partners, and expectations for partnerships activities both in the planning realm and in implementation activities. I'm not going to go into detail on each of these during the call, but one of the main takeaways around setting criteria at the state level is that by setting criteria, states can do that in a way that identifies and communicates what a quality partnership should look like locally, but also need to be able to provide partnerships with flexibility that they're going to need to address local differences and industry-specific needs. So they're criteria that set a vision while at the same time providing flexibility. And these types of program initiatives, as I said earlier, can be set in legislation, executive orders, policy guidance, or RFPs for grants. Okay, next slide, please. So once a state adopts a sector partnership policy, it needs to choose how to administer and assess that policy. In terms of administering the policy, we think that it's important for states to choose a lead agency to administer the policy, and the agency that acts as a lead agency can really vary depending on a state's particular structure and needs. In one place it might be the State Workforce Board, in another it could be the Department of Labor or Commerce, another it could be a community college board, or even a public-private agency. Regardless of the lead agency that's chosen, we think it should be based on the experience that that agency has administering funds from a funding source, its experience working with the types of entities and organizations that are going to be engaged in partnerships locally, and its ability to connect the state sector partnership policy to other workforce and economic development strategies. It's also really important for the lead agency to collaborate with the state's other education, training, and economic development agencies to make those connections between the sector partnership policy and other key workforce and economic development policies in the state. In terms of assessing partnerships, we recommend that states identify how they're going to use WIOA's outcome measures to assess the performance of sector partnerships. So for those of you who are familiar with WIOA, sets forth particular outcome measures for workers, and then it has an effectiveness in engaging employers measure that's under development as well. So there's an opportunity to think about applying those metrics to the performance of sector partnerships. Additionally, states may want to think about additional measures they'd like to adopt to get at some of the key themes of sector partnerships in their states that aren't covered by the WIOA measures. Next slide, please. So that is really an overview of sector partnership policy as it relates to NSC's 50-state scan and toolkit. And now I'd like to turn to our speakers to hear more about how sector partnership policies are working in their particular states. And as Brian noted during the introduction, we're lucky to be joined by Nancy Snyder from Massachusetts' Commonwealth Corporation, as well as Emily Templin-Lesh from the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and Carrie Cart from WSOS Community Action and the Ohio Workforce Coalition. So to get us started with the discussion, I've asked each of them to spend a few minutes describing the types of support their state provides to local sector partnerships. And I'm going to start with Nancy Snyder in Massachusetts. So Nancy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Brooke. And I'd also like to thank National Skills Coalition for putting together the toolkit and for inviting Massachusetts to be part of today's webinar. And I'm going to frame my discussion in the three areas that Brooke talked about: funding, technical assistance, and program initiatives. So in terms of funding, in 2006, the legislature created a vehicle called the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund that supports sector partnerships. The fund received an initial appropriation of $18 million that supported 31 partnerships from 2007 to 2012. It received another $5 million in 2012 that is currently supporting 15 partnerships in a 3-year grant period. The first 2 appropriations were done through economic development legislation and not through the annual budget. In fiscal year 2016, for the first time, the WCTF is a line item in the state budget with an appropriation of $2 million. We're hopeful that being a line item helps to position the fund for annual appropriations. We have a request for proposals out now to fund partnerships with the $2 million available through the FY16 budget. Before and during the recession, the partnerships provided training for unemployed, underemployed, and incumbent workers. The focus now is on unemployed and underemployed workers. We have other funding streams that are supporting incumbent worker training. We've also focused primarily on training and education for individuals who do not have degrees, but there is some flexibility there depending on the region and the industry. We provide technical assistance in 3 ways: one-on-one technical assistance. We have a quarterly dashboard that measures inputs and outcomes for partnerships. The process of reviewing the dashboard with grantees highlights the quality indicators and success measures. Based on the numbers, we will prioritize technical assistance for partnerships that are struggling to enroll participants, support them in completing training, and placing them into jobs. Often this is focused on program design issues. We also create peer learning opportunities. We have learning communities that bring together grantees to share best practices and to focus on issues that are common across the partnerships. We've also developed guidebook on partnership formation, employer engagement, and measuring business impact. Those are all on our website. In terms of program initiatives, the legislation that created the WCTF laid out many of the policy parameters of the program. We do have defined geographic areas. We have 7 regions that are mostly comprised of multi-workforce regions. We do not generally target industries, but there have been times when the legislature has directed us to target industries, and then of course we do that. What we're really looking for across the board are partnerships with businesses that are actively hiring, and in-depth information about their hiring needs and willingness to partner and consider hiring graduates. We've had partnerships in a wide range of industries. The 2 most represented are healthcare and advanced manufacturing. The legislation allows for many different kinds of organizations to be the partnership convener. In the most recent round, the highest number of conveners are workforce boards or community-based organizations. We've mixed it up a little bit in terms of identifying partners. In 2012, we required workforce boards, career centers, community colleges, and career and technical high schools along with employers. We're not requiring all of those partners in the current request for proposals. However, we do allow for additional capacity building dollars, and in that case, we require additional partners that are critical to systems change. In general, we've seen the most successful partnerships engage in research and planning activities that strengthen their knowledge of the targeted industries, their relationships with businesses in that industry, and their ability to demonstrate value to that industry, often beyond the goals of the grant that they've received. And those are the partnerships that tend to be sustained over time. So that's an overview of Massachusetts, and I believe we're now turning it over to Emily in Colorado.
Great. So thank you. And great update from Massachusetts. And so here in Colorado, first I want to send a big thank you to the National Skills Coalition for the opportunity to share the Colorado sector partnership story and also the opportunity to learn from other states. This has really been critical, and this peer learning across states has been really critical to moving sector partnerships and career pathway work forward as key strategies to develop Colorado's talent pipeline, really learning from other states and pulling best practices together in a way that work well for our state. So a big thanks to NSC for the work that you do to connect best practices across the state, or across the country. And so the two questions that I was asked to address is really around what types of technical assistance we provide and Colorado provides to partnerships, and also what we see as the benefits of providing such technical assistance. So first I'll take a step back and explain who I'm with. So I'm Emily Templin-Lush with the Colorado Workforce Development Council, and we do provide robust technical assistance in a variety of forms to support regional sector partnerships. And the reason that we do that is that we have made some very intentional choices over the past several years, over the past 4 years, around Colorado's sector partnership strategies. And our story is a little different than other states, and our sector partnerships look a bit different than, for instance, Massachusetts. And so we launched the next generation of sector partnerships in a very intentional way with some really key components and differences from other sector partnerships across the country. But as I said earlier, really drawing from best practices that we saw across the state or across the country, as well as best practices that we saw across the state that we gleaned from a pilot grant program. But that leads to our first key difference in that Colorado does not provide funding for sector partnerships currently. So we really very intentionally want our sector partnerships to focus and to be a way of doing business across partners from workforce, education, and economic development partners. And the mix of those partners looks different depending on the regional economies and the regional needs and what industry determines the needs are. So we did not want our partnerships and made a choice to not have our partnerships coming together as a shorter-term grant program, but as a long-term partnership and a way of doing business. So this strategy, as I mentioned earlier, is informed by the outcomes from pilot grants that we did give out 5 years ago, and then launched the next generation of sector partnerships 3 years ago. Another key difference is that our sector partnerships are not just about workforce, but focus on the opportunities for industry partners to work together broadly. And then similar to all partnerships, it's really all about industry leading the partnerships and industry collectively identifying their needs and opportunities to work together. So now I am going to move on to the technical assistance piece of it. So our approach really does heavily rely on technical assistance, and technical assistance is a key cornerstone for launching our next generation of sector partnerships in Colorado. So first we have one-on-one coaching, and have provided one-on-one coaching and technical assistance to regional partnerships across the state, no matter if they are working to launch partnerships or they have existing partnerships that have been sustained over time. And the coaching really is customized to meet the needs of their partnerships and where they are. We also have a robust statewide community of practice. We have monthly peer networking calls that are both broad and focused across all industries, and then we also have monthly peer networking calls that are industry specific for partnerships across the state working in the same industry to connect with one another. We also do several convene partners statewide in many different ways. So we've held 2 sector summits, which is when we first launched the next generation of sector partnerships just about 3 years ago now, over 3 years ago now. Which brought together partners from across the state and regional teams from across the state from workforce, education, and economic development, together with statewide partners and state agencies focused on this alignment as well. Just 2 weeks ago, we hosted a Sectors Academy which was really all about setting aside time for regional teams to work together as those regional teams together with a coach and a facilitator, which has really resulted in some great peer learning. We also have done a series of statewide training over the past few years on topics such as how to convene and facilitate a sector partnership launch meeting, how to sustain a sector partnership, how to identify key industry leaders and champions and grow industry champions across the state. So another key piece of our technical assistance strategy is our overall producing frameworks and models for work across the state. So we have a sector partnership convener guide, which is all about breaking down the steps to convene and launch a sector partnership and also to sustain a sector partnership. We also have a creating Colorado Career Pathways step-by-step guide, which refers to the sector partnership convener guide, but provides a basis for developing career pathways out of sector partnerships across the state. So we produce those products and frameworks and resources for our local areas. We also provide labor market data on both industry and occupational trends that the partnerships can use to identify the need to launch a sector partnership in the region, to take their sector partnership to the next level, and also to do career pathway work in their region. So then also I was asked to discuss the benefits of providing the TA. So the result of our technical assistance and our focus on technical assistance has been real authentic partnerships that are driven by businesses across Colorado. So in Northern Colorado, we have the NOCO manufacturing partnership, which is a great example of businesses coming together, identifying their priorities, and having three main committees that they work through. So manufacturing talent, manufacturing rocks, and manufacturing networks. These businesses are actively driving the partnership forward. They're actively contributing funding to the partnership, so on a project-by-project basis and a need basis. So things like developing a website, buses, contributing funding to tour individuals and students around their manufacturing facilities. They also have received grants through their city and through the community college system. So overall, that's a great example of how technical assistance has helped them get to where they are. Overall, we have been thinking of sector partnerships as a real key strategy for systems change in Colorado, as is evident in Northern Colorado with the NOCO manufacturing partnership. They have 2 community colleges, 3 school districts, 2 workforce centers, and 2 workforce regions that are working together collaboratively to address the needs of the manufacturing community in Northern Colorado. And the technical assistance that they have received is really critical to that. So they really have used the step-by-step guides, for instance, actively participated in the training opportunities, and really taken that technical assistance and move their partnership forward to achieve outcomes for their Northern Colorado community. I think another benefit, the overall benefit of this approach and the technical assistance approach in Colorado really gets back to the old adage of give a man to fish and you'll feed for the day, and teach a man to fish and you'll feed for a lifetime. So as a result, we have over 20 active or emerging partnerships across Colorado. And that is the Colorado sector partnership story, and in particularly related to the technical assistance as being a key cornerstone to sector partnership work in Colorado.
Great, thanks so much, Emily. Ohio, we have Carrie Carr on the phone from Ohio. Carrie, can you give us a sense of the types of support that Ohio provides to local sector partnerships, please?
Sure. Thank you, Brooke, and thank you to the National Skills Coalition for creating the state scan and toolkit and allowing me to talk about the great state of Ohio. Within Ohio, workforce development has always been a priority of Governor Kasich, starting with him creating the Office of Workforce Transformation and appointing a cabinet-level position when he took office several years ago. And last year, the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, in conjunction with the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services, made available approximately $1.5 million to pilot sector partnerships, which Ohio calls them industry workforce alliances. The state funded one grant within each one of the 6 Ohio economic development regions. The funding was made possible through the utilization of both USDOL incentive funds and Health Transformation Innovation funds. The Industry Workforce Alliance grants supported 2 separate phases over a 2-year period with up to approximately $122,000 each year. The first phase supported increased formation of industry workforce alliances and collaboration among partners specifically related to the use of performance measures, activities, and services, and also supported the development of a career pathway system designed to implement industry-driven strategies that meet the workforce needs of the region. Each grantee had to define their region, analyze the industry chosen, and develop a plan of collaboration and career pathway training. Phase 1 was actually was completed this past July 1st, and grantees have now begun phase 2 of their projects. Technical assistance is provided throughout by the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services and also the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, which created an online Industry Workforce Alliance toolkit and contains informational materials such as Industry Workforce Alliance goals and processes, PowerPoints that provide an intro to what sector partnerships and industry workforce alliances are, and also templates such as sample invitations to employers, agendas, workforce needs questions for the collaboration to ask themselves and the employers, along with Ohio in-demand jobs data to assist the grantees. Along with NSC's new sector partnership toolkit, you can view Ohio's templates, agendas, and so forth at workforce.ohio.gov. And then going into phase 2, that actually supports the actual implementation of the funded industry workforce alliances, delivery of developed curriculum through either short-term training, OJTs, internships, or co-ops to eligible participants. And phase 2 also supports increased job placement in the chosen industry occupations and reduction in the occupational demand of the industry. The funding that Ohio has provided has brought together collaborations of business and industry, workforce and economic development professionals, adult basic and literacy education providers, which were a mandated partner within the grant, community-based organizations, labor, and Ohio technical centers, community college, and/or universities across Ohio, all which bring additional expertise and resources to the Industry Workforce Alliance collaborations. However, currently, Ohio does not believe they need state legislation nor a new dedicated funding source. They believe that they're getting it done now with the funding sources that the state currently has, and would like to see the workforce investment boards take a more active role in the creation of industry workforce alliances. So the Ohio Workforce Coalition believes we have a wonderful start and beginning here in Ohio, but we will continue to watch the progress of the project and look at outcomes and advocate for additional dedicated funding to support sector partnerships. Thank you, Brooke.
Hi, Nikki, this is Brooke. There we go. There. I would like to get into a bit more detail now on Massachusetts. And Nancy, I'd like you to spend a little bit time talking about your funding and how sector partnerships actually use the funding. Specifically, what types of activities do grants support for sector partnerships, and how are partnerships using those grants to leverage their partner resources and to sustain some of their activities? So I'm going to turn it over to Nancy to answer that question as it pertains to Massachusetts. We're having some technical difficulty again as we can't hear Nancy talking. While we're waiting for that to get fixed, let's see if we can get Carrie on the line. Carrie, are you able to hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. I'm going to apologize to our webinar participants. We seem to be having some technical difficulty with getting folks on the line. I'm going to put you on hold for just one moment while we figure out what's happening. My apologies. Please hold. Thank you.
Brooke, can you hear me?
Okay,
so should I go ahead?
Yes, Nancy, please go ahead with your focus on funding. I apologize to folks on the phone, and we're back up and live. Go ahead, Nancy.
Okay, so the Workforce Competitiveness Trust Fund grants support convening, outreach to employers and to job seekers, screening and assessment, training, case management, support services, job search supports, and retention supports. The grants support continuous improvement in order to allow for modifications in program design or curriculum as the partnerships learn from experience about what's working and what is not working. Grants may also support adult basic education and English as a second language integrated into the training design. Funding has supported planning activities in the past when we got the $18 million initial appropriation, as well as targeted research activities that shed light on emerging or persistent workforce challenges. The WCTF grants are often the first grant that a partnership receives to develop a strategy to address a persistent workforce need. There are a number of examples of partnerships leveraging additional resources, both private and foundation, and being sustained over time. For example, there's a partnership in Franklin and Hampshire counties that's highlighted in the toolkit, in which the private sector partners raised $250,000 for state-of-the-art machinery at a career and technical high school, and the grant dollars paid for the training and operations. When the partnerships include community colleges or career and technical high schools, the programs that are started up through the grant are often institutionalized and sustained through tuition, and the partnerships continue to serve as advisory committees to the program. In some cases, the partnerships started with WCTF dollars have resulted in additional state or federal funding to support ongoing training, along with contributions by businesses to support training for incumbent workers. Examples of other state funding are economic development dollars or workforce training fund dollars for incumbent workers. Federal funding has included national emergency grants for sector partnerships. Many partnerships have used the WCTF grant to develop a program and partnership infrastructure and then add capacity through WIOA, TAA, or programs like Living Cities grants that are awarded by the Boston Federal Reserve Bank. In addition, philanthropic dollars through individual foundations or funding collaboratives like SkillWorks in Boston are investing in the partnerships that demonstrate success and value. Of the 31 partnerships funded before 2012, 18 continue to operate in one way or another. Of the 15 partnerships that are funded until June 30, 2016, 10 have already identified resources to sustain their work past the grant period. To date, the partnerships have leveraged over $18 million in matching funds from businesses, philanthropy, and other sources. In the best cases, the capacity that's sustained is strategic capacity that allows partnerships to shift priorities and strategies as conditions change. There are a few industry partnerships in the Hampden County region of Massachusetts that have been sustained over nearly a decade. The state's Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative has adopted the regional partnership strategy as a key workforce pipeline strategy for the industry. A number of healthcare partnerships across the state have been sustained over time with private, state, and philanthropic funds. The state's investment in sector partnerships is leveraging other dollars and building important strategic capacity that can be tapped into to respond to a number of industry and community challenges. Most importantly, the investment is putting people to work and responding to industry skill and talent needs. So I think that's the summation of the funding piece.
Great. Thanks so much, Nancy. Nikki, can you skip ahead 2 slides, please? Okay, so now we're going to hear from Carrie. Carrie, as you know, you're part of the Ohio Workforce Coalition, and I was hoping that you could give us some information on some of the steps your coalition took to advocate for this state to adopt a sector partnership policy. For example, what were some of the key messages, and who were some of the messengers that were part of the coalition? Okay, Carrie, are you there?
This is Carrie. Can you hear me? Okay, I guess I can be heard now. I'll start with the questions for Ohio were regarding what steps did the coalition take to advocate state policy, and what were the key messages, and who were the messengers. The Ohio Workforce Coalition began with making sector partnership strategies a priority within our policy platform and showcasing projects within each of the economic development regions of the state, which also included strong analysis of demographics, educational levels, unemployment, occupational influence, and then, of course, some of the projects showcased. We then came up with our elevator speech, if you will, and marketing material to distribute with the main goal to educate, engage, and make change. We began building our alliances through making information public and commissioning endorsements. As you know, strength in numbers is always good as long as everyone agrees with the goals and objectives. And in doing so, we obtained close to 200 endorsements in a matter of weeks. In addition, once we were clear on our objective, developed a strong case with research and facts, had a clear message, and gathered support, a consensus was then made as to who our target audience was, and Ohio Workforce Coalition leadership members began scheduling in-person meetings with local, state, and federal elected officials and the governor's cabinet level executives. We often worked in teams, so there were at least 2 of us, if not 3, in meetings representing a broad group of stakeholders, and many times employers were at our side. As our advocacy efforts proceeded, including testifying when appropriate, we would review our goals, facts needed, and address strategies and concerns often and in a timely manner. And then came the celebration. The inclusion of industry workforce alliances as a best practice model was a huge success. The Ohio Workforce Coalition, since we have been educating executive individuals and advocating for sector partnerships for many, many years, we're very proud that our work in advocating the state and elected officials on sector strategy policy was adopted as a best practice model at one of the governor's executive workforce board meetings last year. It was a tremendous celebration. As far as key messages of the coalition and who were the messengers, as I stated, the Ohio Workforce Coalition leadership members who have been implementing successful sector strategies for years were the messengers, along with labor, higher educational professional partners, community-based organizations, and employers. Since 2001, actually, after some of us were funded by USDOL sector employment demonstration funds, it really came natural for us to educate and advocate to local, state, and federal officials on the successes of our projects and sector initiatives as a whole. For instance, under WSOS, we operate a marine trade sector project, and we'll be celebrating our 15th anniversary this coming year, working with job seekers and business and industry. So we have many stories to tell and portray successes. After many meetings with the Governor's Office of Workforce Transformation, I think they themselves sum up the message that was portrayed and advocated for the best, and I quote the director at the time: "Our office is excited about industry sector partnerships as a vehicle to address critical workforce shortages. We believe sector partnerships have been established as the best practice in the workforce development space, not only in Ohio, but across the country. The value of the partnership is to have an industry-led dialogue to begin to address the challenges businesses face in finding the workers they need. Data regarding workforce shortages takes us only so far in our workforce reform work. A sector partnership allows an industry to work collaboratively with education and training partners, local workforce, unions, and other workforce partners to devise solutions to address workforce shortages and help grow the talent pipeline. I think it says it all right there. Thank you, Brooke.
Thanks so much, Carrie. So before we move on to questions from the audience, I wanted to ask one final question of all of the panelists. Nikki, can you please advance to the next slide? Great. Okay. So the toolkit that we put out emphasizes the opportunity, as you heard in my remarks, for state policies to connect sector partnerships to other workforce strategies and make them a central component of the workforce system. And we've heard a little bit of that already in the remarks that our speakers have made. So I was wondering if each of you could describe quickly how your state policy is connected to career pathways that create a pipeline of skilled workers in a particular industry. I thought we would start with you, Nancy, and then we can move on to others if they have something they'd like to add. So Nancy?
Sure. So I would say, career pathways aren't currently required, and I would say we probably have more experience doing career ladders. But we're now really beginning to focus on what are those foundational skills that people need to even enter the sector training. So we have a request for proposals out now where we're asking partnerships to track the reasons that individuals are not enrolled in programs. In other words, why are they screened out? So that we can do a better job of understanding what capacity we need to build out before training to keep more individuals on a career pathway. And we did ask the current set of 15 partnerships to develop a work plan around career pathways. So for example, the Franklin-Hampshire partnership that I talked about earlier that's focusing on CNC training is really looking at how do we build out those foundational, the capacity to develop foundational skills in order to build a pipeline for CNC training.
Great. And while we're on the topic, Nancy, can you give us a little bit of information about how your state sector partnership policy is connected to any planning it's doing for its state WIOA plan?
Sure. We've been engaged with many, many partners, really being led by the Secretary of Labor and Workforce Development and the Executive Office. We are doing a combined plan in Massachusetts. So WCTF provides a base for a discussion of the designated regions. Sector strategies are recognized as an essential building block for engaging employers and developing training and career pathways that lead to employment. Sector partnerships will be included as a measure in workforce board certification, and they're an essential element in the customer flow charts for businesses and job seekers.
Great. Thanks so much, Nancy. Emily, if you're on the line, can you give us the same perspective from Colorado, both how sector partnerships connect to career pathways and to other workforce strategies under WIOA?
Yes, happy to. So in Colorado, sector partnerships are the organizing vehicle for industry sitting at the table with public partners to inform and really drive the development of career pathways. And so there's several sector partnerships that are really driving the development of regional career pathways. So more specifically, the sector partnerships are identifying critical occupations, and then they're doing deep dives into what knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed for critical occupations, and developing pathways and mapping out what pathways look like. And so in the short term, the process has really already resulted in short-term curriculum changes around public partners from workforce and education, really aligning programs in order to get individuals placed into jobs with the skills that are needed by particular industries. And we have a few specific policies that have provided this framework. And much like Ohio, and I appreciated Ohio's comment around Ohio not feeling like they need policy right now to move this work forward, because Colorado definitely has been in that place. And just over the past 2 legislative sessions, has there been interest, and also has the sector partnership work in the state, and the foundation has been laid to where there are some effective policies now in place. And so, so some specific policies that we have, in 2013, a piece of legislation was passed that really codified sector partnerships as a critical strategy for the state and a vehicle for industry-driven career pathways, which has just resulted in helping to coordinate and align partners. We also have a few pieces of career pathway legislation. So one in 2012 around the development of a manufacturing career pathway, where it calls for industry engagement to happen through sector partnerships to inform the development of that career pathway. And then just last year, we have 2 workforce bills that passed that really help connect sector partnerships and career pathways. So one is around increasing post-secondary workforce readiness and connecting resources across the state to grow foundational skills that are needed. And then the second one is around career, more specifically around developing and building out industry-specific career pathways. So as a state, we're currently working on building out an IT career pathway that is informed by regional sector partnerships and regional career pathway work. And so those are some of the examples of policy. And there's one other piece that I wanted to hit on as well. And Brooke, you mentioned the lead agency as being one of your key findings. And so in Colorado, the lead agency is the Colorado Workforce Development Council around sector partnerships. And we have an executive order that really provides us with the guidance to really be the coordinating body across workforce education and economic development, which has put us in a really great place for being that lead entity. So I wanted to mention that executive order as well. And then in terms of WIOA, so sector partnerships are really foundational to our state's plan and overall to the direction of growing Colorado's workforce. And so it's a really critical strategy that's at the foundation of our state planning efforts. So I'll leave it with that right now.
Thanks so much, Emily. That's really, really helpful. And then Carrie, anything you want to add a few minutes on how the state of Ohio is connecting sector partnerships to career pathways, or from an advocacy perspective, whether there are steps that the coalition has taken to advocate for partnerships started under the pilot program to be integrated into the state's strategy through WIOA. And then when we're done hearing from Carrie, I will turn it over to Brian so we can hear from those of you on the line with your questions. So Carrie, go ahead, please.
Great. Yes. Thanks, Brooke. Ohio has embraced a sector-focused career pathway for low-skilled adults and youth by focusing funds on increasing skills, competencies, and credentials informed by business and industry and based on occupational job analysis. The career pathways that are being developed are they include well-connected education and training programs, whether it's via multiple linked and aligned programs, entry, on-ramps, and exit points, and may include bridge and remedial programs to help low-skilled adult and youth succeed. Ohio has also developed career pathway information for a large majority of the in-demand jobs within the 9 priority sectors identified in Ohio, and have shared the information with the current Industry Workforce Alliance partnerships and posted them within Ohio Means Jobs, which is the online job matching system for both job seekers and employers, and have also gone as far as to expand Ohio Means Jobs into the Ohio Department of Education K-12 system. So all that information is readily available. In addition, Ohio has also has reforms that they're working on with the newly formed Office of Human Services Innovation to better connect low-skilled individuals, starting with our youth, ages 16 to 24 to self-sufficiency. This starts with better coordination of two funding sources, which are TANF offered at our county job and family services offices, and WIOA offered at our Ohio Means Jobs American Job Centers. Their career pathways within the new reforms should focus on participant instruction and skills training, appropriate and meaningful assessment, supportive services and career coaching, intensive case management, and direct connection to employers. The Ohio Workforce Coalition is closely reviewing these reforms. The comment period just closed with the state, and we will weigh in when appropriately. Two of our additional policy platform goals are to advocate for policies that reduce barriers for adults pursuing education and training and improve the efficiency and effectiveness of the state's workforce development system. So well-developed career pathways are certainly an important part of both those goals, and Ohio is moving forth with that. And then as far as our state's sector partnership policy being incorporated into the state plan under WIOA, it certainly was within the unified plan that they submitted last year. Currently, they're working on the combined plan, and which to be submitted by March. Haven't seen it yet, but I can tell you throughout the unified plan that was submitted last year, they spoke to the current funding provided for industry workforce alliances and the technical assistance and the toolkit put in place within it. So the Ohio Workforce Coalition believes and that language will be continued throughout the combined plan. We're hoping that it's strengthened a little bit and brought to the forefront, and of course dedicated funding provided for additional projects and other in-demand occupations included throughout Ohio's economic development regions.
Fantastic. Really helpful to hear that advocacy perspective in addition to the perspective of folks who are administering these programs at the state level. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Wilson to start to ask some questions that he's collected from those of you participating in the webinar. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Brooke. So the first question actually is for Brooke, which is, you seem to draw a distinction between sector partnerships and other types of sector initiatives. Could you speak more to that, clarify that distinction, and also what is required by WIOA?
Sure, that's a great question. So there are lots of different sector-based initiatives. For example, some states may identified key sectors in the states that are critical to their economic development and have identified workforce development strategies as a piece of meeting their economic development goals. And they may be involved in developing training programs that are specific to that industry broadly, or they may be involved in education and outreach programs about occupations in those industries. So there's a host of different types of activities that have that sector-based lens. WIOA itself talks very specifically about sector partnerships and gives a definition of sector partnerships, as I described it earlier in my remarks, where you have multiple employers within a particular industry coming together with labor and education and training organizations, and then the law provides a host of other partners that can be at that partnership. And partnerships are specifically, those partners coming together to continually address the needs, the skill needs of a particular industry within a local area or a region. And so the partnership component of it is what differentiates sector partnerships from broader kind of sector-focused activities. And as I said, WIOA has a definition specifically of what a sector partnership is. WIOA also specifies requirements at the state level and at the local level around sector partnerships. So at the state level, as I mentioned in my presentation, under WIOA states must use a portion of their statewide reserve funds to support local areas in the development, convening, or implementation of industry or sector partnerships. And state workforce boards have to assist the governor in developing and expanding strategies for meeting the needs of employers, workers, and job seekers, particularly through sector partnerships. So sector partnerships are called out that way in the law at the state level. And then locally as well, a portion of Title I-B funds that are allocated to local areas are to be used to develop, convene, or implement industry or sector partnerships and local workforce investment boards. While they don't necessarily have to be the convening organization of local sector partnerships, are required to be at the table in those partnerships. So that is the end of the answer to that question. There's more information about this, I think, in both our scan and in our toolkit for those who are interested.
Okay, thank you, Brooke. So another question is, how have states aligned the focus of the targeted sectors where they support local sector partnerships with other state initiatives where states do have other types of sectoral initiatives? How have states aligned local efforts, regional efforts, and statewide efforts in terms of local sector partnerships and the sectors targeted by other initiatives? And I think I'll ask Emily, if you would, to first address that.
Great, thanks, Brian. Happy to. So we in Colorado, as the workforce development, the Colorado Workforce Development Council and the statewide Workforce Investment Board, but also, as I mentioned earlier, having that added responsibility of being the convener of workforce education and economic development issues in the state. I think having the playing the role of pulling together and coordinating work across agencies at the state level has really helped us to coordinate the work from the local, regional, and state level. So some specific initiatives and work that's been done in that area are the Key Industry Network effort, which was out of our Office of Economic Development and International Trade, focused on Colorado's key industries, or the industries that are really driving Colorado's economy. And as a result of that effort, there was a real focus on workforce needs of these industries. And so that is the statewide umbrella in which the regional partnerships have been organized under. So our sector partnerships are all regional in focus. And then local efforts feeding into those regional efforts. And so we really have we've set up a system, so to say, roughly as the state being the overarching umbrella to connect regional efforts, and then regional efforts really helping to connect with local efforts and feeding into local efforts. So I hope that helps, and I'm happy to provide additional information on that.
Thank you, Emily. Nancy, would you like to address that as well, how in Massachusetts?
Sure. So earlier in 2015, Governor Baker signed an executive order creating a workforce skills cabinet, and that cabinet includes the Secretaries of Economic Development, Labor and Workforce Development, and Education. And they've laid out a body of work that includes coordinating efforts across those three secretariats, really focused on meeting industry workforce needs, both in some specific local areas, like the city of Holyoke, but also then with some more industry-oriented initiatives. All three secretaries signed an MOU. They meet regularly and are really working very hard on how do we coordinate across those three areas to both respond to really specific and immediate issues that might be a company coming in, or again, a community that needs some work, or a little bit more long-range strategy. So we have an advanced manufacturing collaborative in Massachusetts, and as I mentioned earlier on, they've really adopted the regional skills strategy as the way that we're going to meet the workforce needs of the manufacturing industry. And as a result, there's been not just the Competitiveness Trust Fund, but other resources that have been put into ensuring that the partnerships that were started with the Competitiveness Trust Fund can grow in terms of scale and be sustained over time.
Thank you. I'm afraid we only have time for one more question as far as answering during the webinar. And that question is, what can state policy do to help ensure that the business community is at the table in the sector partnerships? And not only that businesses are represented, but the right businesses to be effective representatives of the sector, and the right individuals to represent those businesses. So who would like to speak to that?
So this is Nancy. I can take a shot at it. So we require 2 or more employers to be involved, but when we're reviewing proposals, and this is always a very competitive process, we're really looking specifically at which businesses are involved from the industry, who from those businesses, but more importantly, really granular detail that gives us an idea of what the businesses are hiring for and how they're going to be engaged around curriculum development, internship opportunities, and hiring. And sometimes we'll require that they sort of sign it. We always require an MOU. Sometimes we'll ask if they're willing to make hiring commitments. Sometimes we give extra points for that. But at the end of the day, we're also holding these partnerships accountable for results. And I would say that what we found is if the right employers, the right people from the right employers haven't been involved in meaningful ways, they're not going to make, they're not going to achieve the results that we've sort of collectively set out. And so we'll sort of get involved very early on if that's the case in a partnership.
Emily or Carrie, would you like to speak to challenges and how you've overcome them in getting employers to the table?
So when we launched our next generation of sector partnerships, we've really found that the framework of regional sector partnerships and focusing broadly on the needs of that industry and the collective needs that they have has really helped industry members come back and to see the value in sector partnerships for them. So I would say that it's all about how the partnerships are organized and the role of the partnership. So little suggestions that we've provided through our technical assistance are things like really setting up the meeting, coming down to detailed things like how the meeting is set up physically in the room, and having our industry members really sitting front and together, and the meeting being all about them having a conversation, a facilitated conversation to identify their collective needs and how they can work together. And then from there, we've seen a tremendous ownership from industry and moving the partnership forward. And so that's what I would say. So I think it really comes down to really forming those authentic partnerships that are really truly driven by businesses. And we have, we have a lot of information on our website, which is sectorssummit.com. So sectorssummit.com. And you can find a variety of resources from Colorado and there.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we are past time. We do have additional questions. We will try to answer those offline, off the webinar. Many individuals asked if we will be providing materials from the webinar, and we will be getting those materials out and links for additional information as well. So I'd like to thank our speakers very much, and for the audience, appreciate folks sticking with us through our audio difficulties. And again, thank you all, and have a good day.
You too. Thank you.